Hello, guys. This is Push Dustin with Source Gaming, and joining me today is Ollie Jameson from Minus World.
Hey,
And so, Ollie, he got a chance to go to the Switch event in the UK, and he's here to share some of his experience with us. You got some of the limited tickets on to the event. How did that actually happen?
well, basically, as far as I'm aware, they gave out about 100 tickets. They were split between, they did a kind of raffle on Facebook where you posted some kind of comment, and they also did a raffle for their newsletter for the online store. So that's how I got my tickets through that kind of raffle. It was all randomly selected. And that came as a big surprise. I wasn't expecting that at all. So we went up to London, Hammersmith, and I went with my mate Milo as my plus one. And so basically, there was probably about 100 people with their plus one split across these 2 days. It was very, very busy there, though. Definitely, over 100 people there. And they kind of basically had all of the first party stuff and a couple of third party games that were on show at the Tokyo live stream that was on a couple of nights before. So,
Okay. And what games did you actually get to try out?
I personally tried out basically every first party game they had apart from Snipper Clips, which I'm sore about. I wanted to try that, but there was a big queue. The
Yeah.
way it worked was they gave us this kind of card when we went in that we were supposed to get stamped for every game that we played. And I think it got it got to the last hour and no one had gone to play Snipper Clips, and suddenly everyone wanted the stamp because they were giving away some kind of free stuff, some kind of pin badge they were giving away. Everyone kind of suddenly went to queue for it. But yeah, no, I played Zelda, I played Splatoon 2, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and a couple of games from 1-2 Switch as well. So, and Arms, of course. Can't forget Arms.
Is there a game in particular that really stood out to you?
Well, I mean, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll know that I've basically been gushing about Arms. I wrote a big impressions feature, but I couldn't wait. I had to talk about Arms. I don't know. It really kind of, it's my jam. It's a game all about punching. A lot of people have compared it to Wii boxing. But it definitely felt like a kind of step up from that. Controls really kind of intuitive, responsive. You just have the Joy Cons in your hand and you kind of know exactly what to do. But I guess it is a game about punching, so you'd come to.
You did the motion controller.
Yeah, that was all they had on offer at the event. So the format
Okay.
was there was a kind of very short tutorial followed by two matches, one of which I won, and they had all the characters available that they've announced so far. And yeah, no, I really liked it. I think I've actually noticed a lot of people seem to be a lot of people have been saying, oh, it doesn't look like it's a £60 game, or whatever. That's the kind of retail price of Switch games in the UK, about £50 or £60, which is quite tough to swallow after a generation of kind of £30 and £40 games. But honestly, I think that if they had enough content to Arms, they could have another Splatoon on their hands. I've got no doubts about its value whatsoever. It felt high quality. The controls felt really kind of well put together. It shows to me that there's a real kind of understanding of the hardware from the team who worked on it. Who I think were people who worked on Mario Kart 8, and it just kind of, I don't know, it really kind of stood out to me as something that I think a lot of people are going to miss out on if they assume that it's not worthy of a kind of full retail price tag.
Oh yeah. I mean, everything that I've heard about it and watching the Japanese presentation, I was very excited for it. I think part of the issue was the translator for the English event wasn't that very good for Arms.
Yeah, no, I think the translation in general's come under quite a lot of criticism. Everyone was giving the guy who translated Suda51 a real hard time. I kind of felt bad for him. I don't think the translation really captured the kind of energy that they were trying to get across. And it lost out for that. But I can really safely say, even after only having a kind of brief time with it, this isn't some kind of little downloadable game. This is a proper kind of quality first party Nintendo title. I think you'd be a fool to kind of sleep on it, really. I think they genuinely could have another Splatoon on their hands. It's got the appealing visuals. The character design's really solid. I think it's very simple. You could just pick it up and have a few rounds and it would be fun. But I actually think there's a kind of depth hidden under the surface. I'm not expecting it to be Eva or anything.
Yeah, I think Arms was made by some of the Splatoon people.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there was definitely people from EAD have worked on it. Oh no, it's not EAD anymore, is it?
Yeah, with all the restructuring, I guess.
No, I think it's kind of, there's a lot of potential there, definitely. But that was one that really stood out to me. And that's against games like Zelda and Mario Kart. So I think that says something.
I guess with Zelda and Mario Kart, you kind of expect them to have a certain level of quality, whereas a new IP could go either way.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose in the case of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, you already know what you're getting really, because it's a kind of it's a port of Mario Kart 8, and you already know that's going to be high quality. But if people who have worked on that are working on this, and people who have worked on Splatoon, then I've got no doubts that they're going to create something impressive. So.
Yeah, I'm waiting for more information. I'm sure there'll be more characters, more stages, maybe a couple new modes or something like that. I think there's still a lot more to tell about ARMS.
Yeah, I think maybe the initial kind of way they first showed it off didn't really convey it too well. But I think once you got it in your hands, that's the kind of game that I think would benefit from a demo. I think once people get it in their hands, they'll really start to realize that this is something worth paying attention to.
Was there anything that you're kind of disappointed by?
It's difficult to call it a disappointment. And I wrote about this a bit in my impressions article, and that was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. The Mario Kart 8's a fantastic game. You could argue it's the best Mario Kart game to date. It's kind of quality all around the board. But I think it kind of, I went into it as an upgrade with kind of certain expectations about what the new content would be. So I tried. I played it on the Switch in handheld mode, in the kind of portable mode. Looked really sharp on the screen. To be able to take a game like that on the go, that's pretty good. I raced as one of the Inklings from Splatoon, and the kind of animation quality and everything was what you'd expect. And I think the battle mode will really appeal to some people. There are people who are probably lost without that. That might have been their main kind of go-to multiplayer thing for Mario Kart. And I like it, and I'm happy to see it's back. But I think I was just really hoping there'd be more kind of Grand Prix focused content. If they'd said, all right, here are 2 new cups, and this is coming off the back of the DLC, which I thought was really good. I'd probably be all right. Definitely, this is a day one buy for me. But I don't think there wasn't enough there. So it will really appeal to some people, and I can see that. And I think people who missed out on it on the Wii U, should definitely get on with this. But for me personally, I guess it just didn't really have what I was looking for. And that's partially my fault, because I've gone in with kind of expectations about, based on the fact they've added the DLC, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were expecting them to have at least a couple new tracks, like you said, because right now it's basically just a straight port with battle mode revamped and a couple new characters.
Yeah, and again, the new characters are some of them are fan favorites. But if I'm totally honest, Dry Bones, I don't think Dry Bones is enough to make me drop 50 quid on a game,
Yeah, and it's not a full price.
No, well, in the UK at least, it's slightly cheaper, and the price has actually just gone down recently. Everything kind of went up initially. So Zelda was 60 quid when it first went up. It's now gone down to 50 or 49.99. And Mario Kart 8's price slightly lower. I think it's about 45. So they've obviously taken that into account.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of fluctuation in the UK with prices right now.
There's some kind of I don't know the specifics, but I don't think they're allowed to. Nintendo aren't allowed to set a kind of fixed retail price. They kind of always leave it up to the retailers.
Okay.
So
I mean, I think in the US and Japan even there's a suggested retailer price.
Yeah, see, I noticed in the conference they didn't have one for Europe. They kind of basically said that the retailers are going to set the price, and that's the way it's worked in the past. I think it was like that with the 3DS.
Okay.
So it's all based on kind of the wholesale price of the games, how much they're paying Nintendo.
And how much profit they think they can make.
Yeah.
Anyway, what do you think of the console itself? Do you think it's a good console?
It's almost difficult to get a kind of a good idea, because I've played it for a couple of hours. I think I'll start by talking about the Pro Controller, because that was the first thing that I used, even though it's a peripheral. So I played Zelda on the Pro Controller to start off with. I use the Pro Controller a lot on the Wii U. I use it to play Smash Bros, Mario Kart, anything that you could use it for. And my first kind of response to it was it definitely felt like a sturdier piece of kit. It was quite heavy, quite weighty, and I know they've packed loads of tech into their like NFC and the gyroscope, which worked really well for Splatoon 2. In terms of the actual kind of design of it, I don't think it's quite as sleek as the Wii U one. It felt quite rubbery. The sticks definitely had a lot more resistance to them, and the buttons were a lot firmer, and that's something that carried across the whole kind of Switch system. I thought the Joy-Con had them as well. That there's a lot more resistance on the sticks than what we used to, and I think this is one of these things that will kind of you play it for 10 minutes, you play it for an hour, and so that'll just be second nature to you. You won't think about it. And it's the same with the placement of the sticks. They're not what's the word, parallel. Or, there's some term for it when when the sticks are at the same level.
They're offset.
That's it. Yeah, they're offset now, and I think that was something that it'll kind of bite people at first, but once you start getting into Zelda or something like that, you won't notice it at all. So then my kind of Zelda demo was split between playing on the TV with the Pro controller and then using the Switch in the handheld mode. You transition from the TV to the screen basically instant. I think the trailers are they don't lie when they show how quick it is. The only real kind of inconsistency is you have to press a button to kind of confirm it. But I think that's fair enough. You don't want to. People. I think people are probably going to
accidentally fall it out. Yeah,
they're going to pause their game probably before they take it out anyway, because they're not just going to want to stop in the middle of whatever they're doing. But I was impressed by that. The screen looked very sharp, and I think the size of it's good. I'd probably say it's kind of roughly the size of a DVD case. The screen, going on memory alone, and I think the important thing to kind of think about when looking at the Switch is it really doesn't feel like a handheld to me. You've got the portability, but what you're getting on there is you're getting a console experience. That's a home console kind of quality game, on a portable screen. I think that's something special,
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing, is making sure that people really feel that it's a console.
Yeah, well, they're clearly trying
that is portable.
They're trying to push that with their marketing. They've only referred to it as a home console. And some people have criticised them for that. I think my biggest kind of takeaway from that is, what will this mean going forward? Looking at the next generation of consoles, is this going to redefine what a handheld is? Is it going to be possible for them to go back to a handheld that's of a kind of, lesser visual quality than a console? But only time will tell. I suppose it depends how much of a success the Switch is.
Yeah, this is kind of a different discussion, but I was really surprised that they announced a couple of 3DS games in development with the Fire Emblem Direct.
Yeah, no.
Just because you'd think that eventually they would try to consolidate all of their forces into the Switch.
Yeah, definitely. I think I suppose some of it will depend on how long this stuff's been in development for.
Yeah, that's true.
I think they've talked about supporting the 3DS alongside the Switch. Everyone's made the third pillar joke about how they ditched the Game Boy as soon as the DS caught on.
Yep.
That could happen again. But I think it is good to see. They've got. You can't forget that the 3DS is a massive install base, so they want to make use of that whilst they try and build the Switch up, because otherwise you've got kind of months without any games. And then also, I mean, I doubt this is their tactic because it's Nintendo. But I think some people they'll see again like Fire Emblem Warriors on the 3DS, and then they'll see it on the Switch, and maybe they'll just go, well, look at the difference, and these consoles can both be taken anywhere. So maybe that'll
one's only slightly more portable.
Yeah, definitely. But I think going off onto the kind of on the Fire Emblem Direct, it's quite amazing to see how Fire Emblem's come as a series. I'm not surprised they're still making games for it on the 3DS, because that's kind of the console that's brought the series back to life. So
also, I'm sure they can reuse the engine.
Oh yeah, it looks like that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I think.
Anyway, let's start talking about the Switch again. The UK event. So what are your thoughts on the actual Joy-Cons themselves? You said that the buttons actually had a little bit of resistance in the joysticks as well.
Everything felt quite firm. It didn't feel. I'm not really sure how to describe it, but I suppose some consoles the buttons feel kind of squishy, But these felt quite firm. The Joy-Con was actually something that really surprised me, because I think a lot of people will go into the Switch with the portability is the kind of the main draw. That's the big gimmick, the primary gimmick that everyone's kind of attracted to. But you cannot sleep on the Joy-Con because they can do some pretty impressive stuff. So I played 1-2 Switch, which they had about 5 or 6 of the kind of mini games on show. I tried 4 of them. I played the milking one, which is the one that everyone's been sharing gifs of, which it's as hilarious and humiliating as you think.
Yeah, I saw Nintendon's gif of it.
Yeah, it's one of
which is
these things that I
hilarious.
don't think it's possible to make it look good. So
Yeah.
I also played there was one, I think it was called Ball Count, where you use a HD rumble and you kind of tilt the Joy-Con and there you feel how many balls are in this box. I thought that was good. I think the HD rumble is one of these technologies that people just haven't experienced. So there's nothing really to compare it to. So it all comes down to how it's used. I think that'll be the most interesting thing to see.
So could you actually count the balls?
I could. You could feel them. I found that I was sort of, one off, or I was either spot on with the amount or one off, and I think that really kind of gave me a bit more faith in the idea, because the fact that I was predicting how many balls are in there but was wrong, but only by one, it made it kind of seem a bit more faithful, in that, like, if I'd been off by 5 balls, I'd think, okay, well, this obviously isn't authentic. This feeling isn't authentic. But it did feel you could, it worked basically. I also tried another one, which was a kind of safe cracking game, which used the HD rumble, where you kind of turn your hand around to kind of turn the dial of a safe, and you have to feel for the HD rumble, or you have to just feel for the rumble in general. And I think in terms of that game and in terms of the milking game, my big takeaway from those games were, there's a very basic concept here, and it's obviously it's kind of simple fun, and a lot of the fun comes from your interaction with the other person. But there isn't really much of a game there. I mean, really, with the milking game, all you're doing is moving your hand up and down. I mean, you could kind of argue that there's not really too much to it. Some of the other games are a bit different. I also played the copy dance, which is, I think it's called copy dance, where you kind of basically just pull a pose and your partner has to copy it, and that's a very simple concept as well. But it kind of, because of the technology it uses and because of the way it's kind of executed, it just came across as a lot more fun, because I think there was kind of more to it, a bit more movement involved. My whole takeaway from 1-2 Switch, though, was that I don't even think it should be a pack-in. I think it should be a kind of downloadable title like Face Raiders that came with the 3DS, because it's basically a tech demo more than anything else.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit off topic, but I think when Koizumi he had an interview about 1-2 Switch, he said that Nintendo really wanted to make a game where people could look at each other. They didn't have to look at the screen. So it was kind of like emulating the old card games, or using playing cards, or Hanafuda kind of style of gameplay where you actually have to face your opponent. And so they wanted people not to look at the TV when playing 1-2 Switch.
No, I think it is. It's a very social game, and I think it's got its places. That would be a real hit at parties. If you pulled that out at a party, I think it's very simple. It's almost kind of, some of the stuff you have to do, it almost isn't a game, and the fact that you don't need the screen kind of emphasizes that.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. I think it should be either a downloadable title or a packing game, because I don't know how they can sell it. I mean, I know there's going to be like 20 games in it.
Yeah, that's the number I heard.
But is that going to be enough?
I'm not too sure. I think it kind of... It's sort of... In some ways, it reminds me a bit of Game & Wario. And I suppose it's...
Well, that was also made from a tech demo.
Yeah, I think, that was what I kind of thought was... I remember, our first look at Game & Wario was back when the Wii U was first announced, and Wario was nowhere to be seen. And the games, they're kind of, some of them take advantage some of them took advantage of the gamepad, some better than others, but on the whole, it just kind of, as a result, it was so focused on kind of showing off certain technologies that it kind of felt a little bit hollow as a result. And I think that this is a great game to show off the Switch and to show off the Joy-Con in particular. But the two questions are: are people going to be willing to invest money in a game that's probably more, it's got less substance than something like Wii Sports, and definitely less substance than Nintendo Land in terms of a kind of pack-in would have, or what a pack-in would have, and also will the technology in the Joy-Con that they're showing off, is that going to be used in any other games, and how are they going to use that going forward? Because packing all that stuff into there is great, but people have got to actually use it. And let's be honest, I don't see EA doing anything with an IR detector or a kind of HD rumble. They're not going to suddenly add a kind of protein shake drinking minigame to FIFA or whatever, are they?
No, I don't think they aren't.
General idea, great. It's got that Nintendo sheen to it, and I'm not doubting the quality or the idea, but the current price in the UK is 34. That's come down from 50, kind of gradually, and I still think that's too much. I think they'd actually kind of. My friend who was there with me at the event, he compared it to the Welcome Park on the Vita, which is a sort of app that you use to kind of try out all the different functions on it when you first turn it on. That is not a good comparison for a game that they're charging 30 quid for at all. Yeah. So I'm worried about that game, because I think it's got a lot of potential to draw people into the Switch, and it's the kind of game that families would, if they even buy a Switch and they can have that on there straight on day one out of the box and think, oh, look what it can do, look, you get these kids, look what it can do, mum, all that. It sounds all very cheesy, and people don't like all that Blue Ocean stuff, but I think it's important for Nintendo if they want to make the console a success. And I just worry that the whole idea is just going to be ignored, especially when it's up against Zelda on day one.
Yeah, it's definitely going to get overshadowed, and I think I completely agree with you that it's way too much right now.
And I think one of my worries about the whole pricing kind of issue, if you can call it that. I mean, I've got some kind of strong opinions on the way games are valued, and I think that actually a lot of games are undervalued these days. And I see people looking at a game like ARMS or a game like Splatoon and saying, like when Splatoon was first announced, oh, this isn't worth the full retail, or this should be a downloadable game, or this should be cheaper. But and those are games that I kind of think the opposite, and I think like clearly, looking at the detail and the ideas here. And the kind of the work that's been put in, the only way we can encourage kind of innovation and new ideas, especially from big companies like Nintendo, who get criticized a lot for kind of resting on their laurels with their bigger franchise. The only way we can encourage that is by saying, yes, these new fresh ideas, they are worth full price. But then on the other hand, it's also about substance and content, and that's what I think a game like 1-2 Switch is lacking. It feels very, it feels like a bit, it lacks focus. I think the whole kind of thing.
Yeah. What did you think about the actual event itself?
The event was good. It was held at the I know it was called the Hammersmith Apollo originally, which is a kind of theatre. A nice building. It was quite a small space, especially comparing it to the US event, and definitely comparing it to the Tokyo Big Sai, obviously. But the way it was set up was obviously the first party games got the most attention, and that's fair enough because they were the most popular. Zelda had the biggest space along the back. There was maybe about just shy of 20 setups for that. There was big queues for that the whole time. I was very lucky to get to play it actually, because I'd spoken to people who had been to the event the day before, and they said to me, "You've got to go to Zelda first, or you're not going to get to play it." So we were kind of quite far up the queue, so we were okay for that. It was very British. They had fish and chips, complimentary fish and chips. They've got to put the UK in the name. But no, generally I know it was good. It was a good vibe. It was great to talk to some people there and just kind of get some impressions about the whole thing. My only kind of qualm with the whole thing is I think that they probably could have given third-party games a little bit more space. Everything felt very, very brief with the third-party games, and they didn't have too many developers on hand. I didn't get a chance to talk to any of the kind of indie developers, and I know that some developers who'd worked on Has Been Heroes, I think it's called, were there. But I think that's probably a logistical thing. Maybe it was different on the press day, or because it was run over 2 days, the Saturday and the Sunday. The press were on the Friday before. Maybe it was different then. 1-2 Switch got a lot of attention, like in terms of physical space, but it was one of those games where you could kind of easily walk up to it and play it. You wouldn't have to worry about queuing. I found the same with Arms, which I was disappointed to see because they did a big elaborate setup in a kind of in a boxing ring and everything, or kind of half of a boxing ring. But I think people went there to play. They went there to play Zelda and Mario Kart and all the big names, and I think that's that kind of it shows. They're Nintendo's big franchises, so I'm not surprised. But
yeah.
I'd personally have given some of the smaller stuff a bigger push. But that's me, I write about niche games, so I'm that guy who's still shedding a tear for Steel Diver, so
yeah.
What you will of that.
Well, some people will say that you have your priorities in order.
Maybe. Listen, the day we get a Doshin the Giant direct, like the Fire Emblem one, that's the day where I'll be happy, I'll be content.
If we have 4 Doshin the Giant games in development, I would have a heart attack. I think.
We need this. The first step is 6 Doshin characters in Smash. That's the kind of route into it. I can only think of 2, but
Well, evil Doshin, good Doshin.
Yeah, they're probably better. See, I've in my mind, I've got a kind of good moveset for Doshin in Smash, but you know what they'll say? He's too big. So.
Yeah, he is too big actually. Well, he changes in size.
He does. He grows in
get
size,
bigger.
But
yeah.
No one wants to play a small Doshin. You want to play as the biggest, most powerful Doshin.
Yeah.
He's a lover, not a fighter, anyway. So I digress.
Depends on how you play.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything that you'd like to add? Before you wrap this up?
I think my big taking from the whole event was that there's a lot of potential in the Switch as a console. People will be drawn to it for aspects like the portability. People are going to buy it for Zelda, and I think that's fair enough. But I just really hope that Nintendo will both take advantage of the technology there themselves and encourage third parties to do it as well. I feel that the way they're marketing it at the moment is definitely better than the Wii U, and I think the gimmick is a lot easier to sell than the Wii U. I don't know if you've seen any of the UK TV commercials that have Breath of the Wild in them, but it makes you feel a lot more confident than stuff for the Wii U, in terms of marketing. I think what it will basically come down to is software. We know the Wii U was lacking in software. We know there were big gaps, so there was nothing. First year looks good to me because because Arms and Splatoon 2, games like that are exciting. Some people are looking at it as just there's Zelda at the beginning and Mario at the end of the year and that's it. But I think you have to really don't overlook the stuff in the middle. I didn't play Snipper Clips, but I've been told that that's one to watch.
Yeah. Everything I've heard about Snipper Clips has been really good.
Yeah,
really positive.
I think I need to get hands on with that. I was on the Treehouse kind of streams and stuff, but I think it's the kind of game where you probably need to play it to get a real good gist of what it's about. So yeah, basically, I'm kind of there are problems. I've got concerns. I've got concerns about the online service. The price is a little bit hard to swallow, like I said. But I really hope that we're just going to see more great software from Nintendo, and they've got a unique bit of hardware to work with, and I think that's where they usually shine. So I'm hopeful.
Okay, so where can people find you?
Best place to find me is on the website minusworld.co.uk. I've just posted a big article with all of my impressions of the event, including all the third-party stuff I played. So feel free to go and check that out if you want to hear more of my musings on the whole thing. You can find me on Twitter at minusworld, Facebook minusworldvg, Instagram if you want Oliver Jameson. I posted lots of pictures of the event on there. But yeah, that's the best places.
We'll be sure to include all links to all those in the description, so please check that out. And I'm Push Dustin. You can follow me on Twitter, Push Dustin, or just stay subscribed to this channel for more Switch coverage, Smash coverage. We do lots of things, so check us out. All right, and have a good day.